you'll notice on our website that there's loads of archived bottles or previously sold out bottles currently on the website, which will be there until Sunday. So it's a good kind of chance to take a look at some of our older bottles as well. We've also, because we're tasting the Equinox and Solstice 2022 collection tonight, we've also put up a very limited amount of stock of that collection back up online now just for you guys. So if you head to the shop, it's now available there. But yeah, and I'll kick it back over to Angus.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. Yeah, and thank you all for joining here tonight and for supporting us and deciding to crack open that set of Equinox and Solstice. As I said before, I know it genuinely is very heartening when you get big groups of people like this all together from different parts of the world, or in this case, different parts of one enormous country. So it's really cool, and it's really nice to chat with you all and share work.
Well, Angus froze.
Equinox and Solstice series, because so we're known for whiskey and very kind of colorful satirical labels that we do that are associated with that. And the thing that's gone under the radar, I think, since we to drinks, slightly more serious bottlings that we do, which is really the Equinox and Solstice series. And I came up with the idea for this when I was essentially walking through a forest in my local sort of on the west coast of Scotland, where my parents lived, and I was just wandering around thinking, you know what, I'd really like to do something that's like really speaks to my own true interest in whiskey and my own kind of so the things I'm slightly more seriously into, which tend to be nature or artwork and just generally being a massive hippie, which is kind of what I am in my if Equinox Solstice came from. So I thought, let's do 4 respective or solstice dates, where the seasons are, they have a bit of bite and they have quite a specific character. Whiskey and its profile with its with each respective season. So that's where the idea for Equinox came from. There, it sort of evolved.
Hey Angus, we're getting Angus, I think you're on a bad connection. We're getting maybe like half of what
you're getting feedback.
No, not feedback. It's just going like out, and we only hear like every like every other word maybe.
I'm not.
I definitely heard hippie, so that made me smile.
Hippie, heard hippie and nature, and
yeah. I mean that is essentially, you can boil Equinox and Solstice down to hippie and nature as the 2 key sort of. So are you not hearing me well now?
We can hear you. I might turn your camera off. Maybe that way it might use less bandwidth. Try it now.
Yeah, by all means. I'm sorry about that. I don't know. It might be my internet connection, or yeah. I'm sorry. I'm not. Anyway, I'm happy to take the first whiskey, which is Equinox. So it's the spring edition from 2022, and it's 2008 Pulteney. This series, it's always bought at 48.5, and the idea is to just pair simple whiskies profile idea and whiskies which are very cool, easy drinking, and whiskies which you don't need to spend too much time overthinking about. The idea is just to be able to crack open a bottle, pour a big draught, and just really relax and enjoy it. And so that's where an easy drinking strength like 48%, 48.5% comes in. Still can hour. And that's a key part of this series, I think. And this Pulteney is a very good bottling to sort of express that. So it's it's 2 first fill barrels with 1 refill barrel from 2008, 13 years of age, 48.5%. And I think it shows the Pulteney character really well. And the refill barrel, I think, just adds the right amount of freshness. It takes the edge off the sweeter components from the first fill barrels, and it's like a really nice, well-rounded, very fresh whiskey. It's still got enough of those coastal components from Pulteney. And to me, the reason I wanted to do this for spring was, with spring, I would be fresh and green and bright and sort of citric and floral. And I think that they need to be slightly invigorating and slightly robust, you know, not quite as sweet and easy and carefree as a summery whiskey, but so that's why I thought Pulteney was perfect. This particular composition of casks worked really well. So yeah, the thing about these whiskies is, as I said, they are quite simple. They're designed to be drinking quaff sort of whiskies you can just pour in a tumbler glass, or you can make into a highball and just have a long drink. They're not intended to be whiskies that are necessarily drilled into in the way that we would, you know, cask strength or single cask drams sometimes. So I'm interested to hear what you all think, get everyone's impressions of the Pulteney, and what your initial feelings are about it, and if you have any questions as well.
It's a nice, tasty start with Josh. I enjoy it, and I'm not a big Pulteney fan, I got to say, normally. I quite like it. What is the size of the batch? About how many bottles?
Good question. I think it's around about 860 bottles we got from this batch. Some of the barrels were quite low. And you know,
I think it's really nice. There's a little bit of old library on the finish. I don't know if anyone else is getting that, which is really nice.
The flavor on the finish for me is really, it's almost going towards something like savory nut oil or ground nut oil, or there's some quite unusual flavors going on in there, which I think really comes from the combination of refill.
Yeah, I'm still
characteristics that.
I'm still lingering on the nose, which is I want to pick up the spring theme. It's kind of, you know, meadows in first bloom.
Yeah. And Angus, we can definitely hear you better. It still cuts off a little bit, but I think it's working. I think we're good. One of the things you said, Angus, was about this is an everyday drinker. And with this series, there's a very specific artist that's commissioned to do this, which is kind of like the opposite of an everyday drinker. Because everyday drinker, we usually think, oh, basic label, you put it in the cover. But this is actually, you know, really, really well designed, as well as Sponge, which you all do. There's a character element of your bottlings. There's a lot of thought that goes into the characteristic traits, the playfulness, just making it kind of fun. How does that play into the Equinox and Solstice series? Because these are really elegant, really, you know, artistic bottles. So even though it's an everyday drinker, it's still a really beautiful bottle you could put on your, you know, your back shelf, or when people come over, it's something you put on the beer to share. Julio, yeah, you put in a piece.
I was going to say, I think we may have lost Angus for a second. I will try and get him back on. So the Equinox and Solstice is our kind of more serious bottlings, and because we do them 4 times a year, we try and put a lot of thought into them, and we try and get a different artist every year. So Angus gives each artist every year the same pitch, and it's basically to create 4 individual artworks that reflect those seasons to them. So on our website, you can also see what the 2021
creates a physical artwork on canvas, which is then attached to board. She posts it to me.
I think we lost you again, Angus.
digitally and that.
I'm going to turn off your camera. Yeah, let's see. I just turned off his cam again. Let's see if that.
I wonder if we turned off our cameras as well, if that would help on the input side.
Yeah, that could.
I don't know if it would.
Yeah, Julie, I don't know what you would recommend. We can also, he could call you and just put on speakerphone up to your computer. It's kind of, talk about fast forward in technology. I did that earlier today on a different call. It actually works.
Let me try.
I'll let you guys work that out.
James, I did that on a call this morning as well.
It actually works really well.
One of the attorneys couldn't, his internet was just down. So held him up to the.
Well, they're getting no stress, Julia. You guys worked that out. I really like this. I didn't taste any of these before. I just poured them, sent them out to you all. This is actually really nice. I like that there's some, there's kind of like two different flavor elements going on with the palate and the finish. I really like. I think they're very kind of going in different directions. I think it's really nice.
This is really classic Pulteney. Get a lot of salt on the nose. And for it being only 48 point something, there's a lot of spice in here too, so that's nice.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting some brine on the palate as well, which is just classic Pulteney.
Yeah, I agree. It's nice that we all see each other. We're all on Facebook and other places. It's fun to get together every once in a while. Did anybody add water? I usually don't like to if it's under 50, but never know.
Just a touch at the end. Didn't change a lot.
All right. So,
I think I'm back in.
Yep.
Hello. I'm really sorry about this. This is
when you first popped back in, you were like HD, and then it froze for like a split second. But we can actually see you and hear you.
Yeah, I apologize. This has literally never happened before on any of these tastings I've done. I don't know what's going on. I'm sorry.
No worries.
How,
I talked to
how
someone
is the
today.
Pulteney
It's going to snow and stuff like that, so they said it's probably messing with all the internet connection. Like you guys are have some bad weather or something coming.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's legitimate to blame cold weather in Scotland for anything. Like that would be
you missed
major cop out.
A couple notes that people shared. Who was it? Jeff and Eric. Do you mind repeating that? Jeff had mentioned there's on the nose, maybe you're getting some saltiness.
Yeah, I get a lot of salt. So this is real classic Pulteney. A lot of salt, brine on the nose. And for it being only 48 point something %, there's a lot of spiciness to it, which is really nice. And now it's all gone. I'm sad.
And Eric talked about there's a brine. Yeah, were you talking about the palate, Eric, with the brininess?
Yeah, I got the salt on the nose, but also like I got some really good brine. Kind of the classic Pulteney brine in the palate, as well as like sweeter notes, and then a little bit of spice in there as well. It's very nice and round, kind of a thicker body as well. So very enjoyable.
Pulteney is definitely a whiskey which really plays with this coastal highland idea. Like all of Coast Pulteney and Belplayer in particular, and obviously Clynage too, they all kind of riff off this coastal highland flavour, but they do it in varying ways. And I've always found Pulteney really fascinating for that. And like every Pulteney I have, I'm trying to spot this kind of style in it. So yeah, I felt that this bottling did have that. It'd be quite interesting to see what you all think about this idea of seasonality and whether you think the flavour theme with a season makes. Obviously, on one hand, it is a bit of a gimmick, but on the other, I have tried to pick whiskies that I think fit that kind of the idea of each season. So it'll be interesting to see what you think when we move to the Glen Garioch and compare the two. So I don't know if everyone's ready to go over to the Glen Garioch and compare. The Glen Garioch for the summer edition is a 10-year-old, although actually, by the time the labels were printed, it had become 11-year-old. So it is technically 11 years old, even though the labels say 10. But it's 2011 Glen Garioch, and from 2 first fill bourbon barrels. So this time sweeter, a little bit more wood influence, but again, a really nice, robust, charismatic high distillate. I think Glen makes that has, it still makes something quite and quite particular, and still has some of these kind of wax mineral qualities that you might associate more with older style whiskies. The first fill bourbon in this pairs very well with that because it creates this very sort of rich, sweet barley-ish. It's still quite natural, but the sweetness is well integrated, and it doesn't feel like it's that the casks have dominated too much. It feels there's a lot of nice integration going on, and it's created something, I think, quite rounded and sort of fun and playful and sweet and honeyed. And so I thought that seemed like a very natural, obvious choice for a summer bottling. So yeah, as I say, I think bearing well of the Pulteney and how you think that maybe works spring wind, see if you think sense to to the Glen Garioch that it's a summer dram.
I love that concept.
I don't actually have any more.
We always talk about like cold weather. People think about peat, and I don't know the connection, but I think just naturally that's what people think. But yeah, I think it's great for us all to keep that in the back of our mind as we go through this one and the other two. Does it really fit that? It does so far, in my opinion. I don't know if anyone else has any feelings, but it definitely does. But also, Angus, real quick, is that kind of also, you said kind of a gimmick, but is it more about sometimes people that drink an expression or a whiskey, it's one thing just to buy it, read a label, taste it. It's another to kind of feel the story that was intended behind it. Is there some of that too, in terms of, hey, we want you to feel happy about spring when you drink this. Buy it and open it in spring and drink it during spring. Share it with people in spring. Is that sort of like an intended outcome as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm trying to do something with whiskey that treads the tightrope of finding something specific or interesting to say that is admittedly from a sort of promotional or a niche or a marketing perspective, but do it in a way that is honest and still quality driven and still underpinned by really good quality whiskey that I would be happy to drink myself and that I would be happy to share with my friends. It's really trying to tread that tightrope. So I don't want to just rely on stories and bullshit and just concocted gibberish that a lot of brands do. I want to be able to, walk that rope of coming with a concept or coming with an idea or if we story, the truth of giving should be enough to sell it, in my view. Like that foundational to quality in whiskey and more broadly in most fine alcohols as well. So I always thought things like the seasons and nature and artwork, writing, these were all, to me, really valid themes that were, you could invest enough in making them mean something that you could sit at a tasting like this and talk about it and feel like it was a perfectly legitimate thing to talk about, and that that it's you can be proud of it and say, yeah, it may be a little bit of fun and it may just be at the heart of it just a whiskey and a bit silly, but it also there's meaning behind what we're doing, and we're trying to do something that is really quality focused and gives people something to talk about. I like to think about Equinox and Solstice as a series that people sit around a table with their friends after dinner, just have a big dram and put the world to rights and have a laugh and enjoy life. That's pleasure. That's really the foundational thing about whiskey for me is that it should be about pleasure and friendship and sharing, and so that's really, you know, at the heart of what Equinox and Solstice. That's why it's an strength, and why the whiskies are simple, and why it's something which should be very obvious. The moment you pull the cork out of the bottle, it should be, I get it. That's the, you know, that's the ambition with this, and I hope that that's obvious when you taste the whiskies. Any other thoughts on the Glen Garioch?
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm a reformed bourbon drinker, so I'm only like just about 2 years into malt now, and I haven't had much experience with Glen Garioch, but I think summer is dead on here. One, it reminds me sort of a grappa. It has sort of this lime minerality with pear eau de vie sort of mashed together, and then on the palate you get this limeade with little bit of those waxes that transfer into the finish. But I really love the finish on this one. It definitely reminds me of something I would have in summer. Maybe just a spiked limeade or something like that. It's really, really nice. I typically think of Teaneck for summer pours, like a nice Teaneck cast strength with a drop of ice in there. But this one is right up there with it.
I love this one. Some people here, we did a big nerd convention on Sunday, and I mean that in a good way. We did 7 Glen Garioch, all distilled on the same date, all 18 and 19-year-old, all first fill bourbon, and they were all very different. They were all, we left very complicated, confused about the whole thing. But it was kind of funny because the tasting was, there's a lot of thought, Angus, into the bottles. And what you said earlier, like there's some bullshit element of some of these bottles, and for everybody here that's on that we kind of destroyed that whole story because they all had like independent like names, descriptions, and we're like, no, this is 7 in a row. They're all distilled the same day. We're much more into like, what did the wood do to these? And so this though is really nice. It's different than those. Obviously, the age is about half roughly, but it definitely follows the like the base characteristics of those drams that we had, and for everybody else, all the latest like Glen Garioch that you've been drinking, this is really, really nice. It's really well balanced. I think the 48.5 is really, really key here as well.
The 48.5 strength actually has some historical relevance. Older whiskies and old bottlings, and one of the things I noticed was that a lot of early independent bottlers like Cadenhead and some official bottlers like the early bottlings of Milton Duff from the 50s and 60s, they often used 85 proof, which is the old UK proof, as a bottling strength for malt whiskies. And I checked this, and it was 48.5%. And every time I tried one of these bottlings, I just thought, my God, this has been preserved so well. It's so fresh. The power is just right. It shows so well on the palate, even after decades in glass. It's just a brilliant bottling strength, and it works for other spirits as well. It seems to be one of those kind of universal bottling strengths that works very well across spirits, kind of like 100 proof, 57.1%, which we use a lot as well. And so that was the motivation to use 48.5% for Equinox and Solstice, because it was just a taste, a strength that I thought was just, it has the softness of 46% with some of the power of cask strength, and it meets in the middle of those two, those two organoleptic experiences. So yeah, I think, and also when we're doing a tasting like this where we line them all up, having a uniform strength really helps to bring out the differences in the different whiskies, I think, as well. So are we ready to have the Ben Nevis? We go on to the autumn edition. So this is, we're going into sherry now. So we're really moving into, and autumn is one of my favorite months. And as a person who gets from his life, I appreciate the colder months in the UK. So with autumn, I always want to pick something that's really robust, very comforting, and with like really big assertive character. And Ben Nevis is such a perfect distillate for that. It always carries over this kind of like really weighty, obvious distillery character. And this is a good example. So this is a 2014 second fill sherry butt of Ben Nevis, and bottled at 48.5%, of course. But the thing I liked about this was it's only 7 years old, but it tastes, I think, like it could easily be, 10, maybe even 12 years old. And it's got a fantastic oiliness and fatness in the mouth. It's got wonderful sherry character. Even though it's second fill, it's still got quite a lot of sherry character to it. But the sherry character never dominates the distillery character. It's still very clearly Ben Nevis, but it's sherried Ben Nevis. And I love that clarity. I love that empathy. And that kind of like simple, gutsy, raw, quite powerful, but very, very clear and delicious character is really what Equinox and Solstice is all about. So, yeah, I'm interested to hear your feedback. And this is actually the first time we've done a tasting of a whole series of Equinox and Solstice altogether. So by the end of it, I'm curious to see if this idea of whiskies that are flavor paired to a season makes sense when you try them all together, like sort of holistically, if they all actually start to make each other look like they fit within their respective season. So, think about that. And I'm very curious to hear your feedback. What's people's immediate reactions to the Ben Nevis?
Yeah, you mentioned that you think that this one tastes more like 10 to 12 years, but I would say there's notes in here that scream even older than that. On the finish, pick up some of the like polished oak notes that you wouldn't normally see until a much older whiskey. Now they're not super prominent, but they're there. So I was very surprised to catch that.
Yeah, it's definitely a whiskey that puts you on the back foot a little bit, because you think, no, this was 7. That's another thing I should do some days. Put this in a lineup blind and just get people's reactions. Just what they think it is, what age they think it is, because it absolutely is one that can throw you off your guard if you don't know what it is.
It's beautifully balanced. I think there's a tendency for a lot of independent bottlers to take young sherry whiskey and turn them into sherry bombs, which personally I'm not a fan of. But this is, as you say, it's a really good balance with the distillery character.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of sherry bombs just for the sake of it. Obviously, if we get as we'll find out when we get to winter, we do like a big sherry dram on occasion, but it's got to make sense and it's got to work. And I generally, as a drinker, I tend to veer away from the more extreme sherried whiskies. I really like second fill sherry, exactly like this one that we're trying, because it's balanced and it's rounded. Like we've got a terrific Kalila on the website at the moment, a 2009 Kalila, which is edition 66, I think. Whiskey Sponge edition 66, and that's just from a full term 12 years in a second fill sherry butt. And it's a similar sort of vibe where it's just this really like very obvious but well-rounded sherry character that sits in perfect harmony with very clear distillery character. And that kind of balance, that kind of equilibrium is really what I look for in good sherried whiskies. Everyone does chase, commercially. I understand people want to bottle very dark or first fill sherried whiskies. I understand it, and I like those drams on occasion. But for me personally, the more interesting, the more complex, and the more pleasurable whiskies in sherry tend to be second fill, in my experience. A lot of people mentioning oil, like oil in a car, mechanical oils. I totally agree. I think that is like textbook Ben Nevis 101, that kind of character for sure. It's essentially, I don't know if any of you have ever been to Ben Nevis Distillery, but it's a very grotty working distillery. Like it's essentially like visiting a kind of gulag in the 70s. That's very much the vibe that it gives off. And they probably wouldn't thank me for saying that, but hey, their whiskey is amazing, and it definitely, something's working.
That makes me think that when they do the tasting after the tour, they just pull it out of a trough like a cup, just like grab your own cup and just dip it in. when you explain it that way,
I mean,
it sounds like.
I think they're redoing things now. Like I think the Japanese are finally spending some money to restore it or revamp it and probably spoil it. But for a long time going there, the visitor center was essentially unchanged since the 70s, and trough is probably a pretty accurate term for the public toilets that were available there. So I'm being really mean about Ben Nevis. I absolutely love it. I just think part of its charm is the fact that it's so unreconstructed and rustic, and it is a little bit like visiting the 70s when we go there. And I think to glamorize it and glitz it up and bling it up would be a crime and a shame.
There's a lot of big Ben Nevis fans on here. I know some of you have like huge collections of Nevis, especially obviously 96 Nevis from Whiskey Sponge or any other IB. This is nice. This is really nice.
Yeah, we've done a few Ben Nevis now, and we've got one. We've got half of a 96 butt left to do at some point in the next, I don't know, next year and a half or so. We'll bottle that, and we're always looking for more, of course. And of course, it's worth pointing out that the next Equinox and Solstice bottling, the Spring 2023 edition, is also going to be a Ben Nevis. That's going up on sale on the 20th of March. And that is a single cask. It's a single refill hogshead of 2012 Ben Nevis, 10 years old. So very classical, pure style, very distillate driven. A little bit like the Pulteney, where you get the flow, particularly on the finish. I was just trying it actually for the first time out of bottle, comparing it to the cask sample, and it was, it's worked very well. So it's worth seeking out, I would say, if you're Ben Nevis fans.
Angus, I was looking at the notable age statement Ben Nevis last night, which I think is now gone from sold out. But did I read that it was the same cask as this one?
Yes, that's right. So we did, when I was trying this whiskey, originally I took the cask sample and I put it into about 4 different strengths. And I was just thinking, these are all really good. So the natural strength was close to 63% of the cask sample, which in my view was still good, but by reducing, you could start to see a much better whiskey was sitting in there once a bit of water was introduced. And it was really big cask, even at cask strength, there's probably like close to 800 bottles in this thing. So we thought, it works really well at all these various strengths. Let's split it up and do 2 different versions. So let's 48.5% for Equinox and Solstice, and then let's do a full powered one to the 57.1% 100 proof version in the second notable age statement bottle. And it also worked very well for that, because I thought it's only 7 years old, but let's really make the case that our new series, this notable age statement series, is not about old, also about young whiskies, and that age time is in use.
We lost you again, Angus. Maybe. I think we lost you again. Just following up on something from Josh. The Nevis is 1 second. No, we're not here. We lost you. We're hearing like now 1 of every like 10th word. Let me see. I don't know. And then just so you all know, the Gary and Josh, you asked this question earlier, and for the Pulteney, the Gary was 2 first fill barrels. So they're kind of like all over. Like there was a butt, two barrels, and then the first one Pulteney was 3 total barrels. And while Angus is joining back, Julia, are these all released? So these aren't released at the same time. These are released per season.
Yes, so they're released on the respective Equinox and Solstice. So this one coming up will be the Spring Solstice on March 20th, and then it goes Equinox, Solstice, Equinox. So yeah, it's really good to have them kind of sprinkled throughout the year. It gets at the perfect time. We usually do, as I said, kind of mentioned before, we usually put together a very small collection of the full set towards the end of the year as well. But it's always nice to kind of get them at the season, I think. Well, I'll try and give Angus a call.
No, I talked to a friend of mine today in Scotland, and it was the exact same thing. I don't know what it was. There's something going on with the internet. It's all good. Shall we all start pouring the Mortlach? And I think where's Angus? I think he's back.
I'll just fill a little time while he's getting set up, James. So I love to talk. The whole spring adaptation to what we're tasting is fantastic. And I think he's done a great job so far pairing the first three. I think the last Nevis that I tried was a 23-year-old or 25-year-old refill sherry, and it tastes almost exactly similar to this. And you get those similar, red apple, cinnamon notes. And I feel like this one I'm just eating like an apple crumb pie, going apple picking upstate New York in October. But it's interesting because we have callers from all over the States here. I've grown up in New York most of my life, and my images of, summer turning to fall to winter, winter to spring, I'm sure is very different from what someone in California would have, or someone, Oregon or the North would have. But I guess those central images of like the autumnal, apple spice, cinnamon spice, I guess that's universal.
That's a good point. Yeah, hi, I'm back. I'm sorry. I can only apologize for my horse-drawn, direct-fired Wi-Fi that I seem to have stumbled across here. I just heard what you were talking about this sort of cultural idea of seasons versus people's actual lived experience of seasons, which differ a huge amount, depending on where you live on the planet. I totally agree, and I think that I've selected things very much in mind of, what people's probably shared just cultural ideas of seasons are, which is, like you say, autumnal is that kind of cool, blustery, rustic, thinning leaves on the trees, changing colors, all this sort of stuff. And that's absolutely what's fed my thinking about this series. Because it's also my lived experience as well, living in Britain, it's pretty much, where the textbook idea of seasons came from, I think. So yeah, that's definitely true about this series, and definitely true about, I think, about people's broader experiences in general as well. Speaking of which, shall we taste winter?
Sounds good.
So I actually have some of this that I can taste as well, which is good. So this is a Mortlach. The winter edition is a 10-year-old Mortlach, and it's a change because we I'm quite picky about it, and I tend not to go down that route unless either I control it from the start or it's really got to make sense. But we've started to do it a little bit, and we've had a few which I think are broadly pretty good. And this one, as soon as I tried it, I thought, no, this makes real sense, and it's going to be a perfect candidate for our winter ENS, because going back to what I said a minute ago about sort of cultural expectations and our what we think of when we what's ingrained in our heads when we think of seasons. With winter, I think we often also in the West think about Christmas as well, and this idea of sherry cask whiskies. So I always think of winter in the Equinox and Solstice series as an excuse to
we lost. I don't know if you can hear us, Angus, but we lost you. I think when you said, I forget what he said now. It was like the winter means something, but this is nice. This is very, 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 very holiday spice fruitcake. Okay, until he comes back. Matured first in refill wood, then double matured in fresh sherry wood for over 2 years. And this is a 10-year 2012. Same ABV.
Okay, we've got Angus via speaker now.
Okay.
What was I saying when we cut out? This is quite embarrassing.
Well, this is perfect. This sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay. We lost you when you were talking.
Something whiskey is tasty. Something.
Yeah.
Is that the wizard? Is that the Wizard of Oz?
I have a good beard, but I'm not a wizard.
I was talking about so the winter edition essentially is Mortlach 2012, and matured in refill wood for just under 8 years, and then re-racked into first fill sherry for 2 years. So it's really a double maturation in sherry. And obviously, when a lot of us think of Mortlach, we do think of sherry, and so to me, it was a pairing that works very well. Like the meatiness of the Mortlach, the chocolatey, tobacco-y flavors of the sherry. I think the whole profile worked very well. So please have a try and tell me what you think.
It's very soft, very, very soft. It doesn't have that like meaty funkiness that you get from some of it. It's not as bold as some of the other Mortlachs. I've had a beast.
It's funny because I find it really, really oaky, which I actually kind of like on Mortlachs, but I find it sort of powerful.
Yeah, I think that with this one, I don't know how much of what I was saying earlier that you guys caught before I cut out, but with Equinox and Solstice, with the rest of the series, spring, summer, autumn, I'm usually trying to pick whiskies which are very natural and very close to the raw ingredients and tend to show a lot of distillery character. But when winter comes around, I think it's a real excuse to just go for hell for leather for like really intense big sherry, because that to me is what winter is about. And it's also, I think, a big part of winters in the West is Christmas. And so there's a slight nod to that kind of association as well.
On the finish, I'm getting either. I can't decide whether it's an edge of soapiness or an edge of apple. One of those is happening sort of on the finish.
I'm nosing it again now. I'm getting like toffee apples and like cinnamon sugar, or like cinnamon breakfast cereals, something like that. Every time I come back to this whiskey, I find something a bit different in it, because it was quite strong when bottled. It's quite strong when
empty from cask.
Yeah, I noticed you have this one as part of the notable age statement. What is the ABV on the NAS version?
58.5. So this is another one where we split it in half, again, because of the size of the cask. So we did half at 48.5 and half at natural cask strength 58.5. So the notable age statement version that's the good thing about these split bottlings as well, is that you realize just this, there are probably multiple different whiskies in there depending on the dilution you use. So splitting it at two quite extreme strengths like that, 10 degrees apart, when you do them side by side, you really notice huge differences. So this one is obviously the easy drinking version, and if you go to the cask strength notable age statement version, that's really absolute screaming powerhouse sherry bomb central. I think it's the sort of whiskey where it's really for people that would fetishize Abel Arabuna in the early days, essentially. How are people getting along with it? What's the general sort of consensus on this Mortlach then?
So Alan Liu, who's on this call, normally gives me shit because Mortlach is one of those distilleries that have never clicked with me. this is the first Mortlach that's ever clicked with me, and I'm not just saying that to kiss ass right now. Like it is absolutely the first Mortlach I would buy a bottle of. I get a brambleberry blueberry thing in the finish that's driving me wild. And I love that it's so meaty, which I really haven't gotten on a Mortlach yet. But this is really, really meaty and chewable. I destroyed my sample, and I wish I had more.
I know what you mean, the blueberry bramble kind of note in the background. I rarely find blueberry in a whiskey, but I definitely get it in this Mortlach. And the meatiness to me is kind of like a game meat, like a sort of salami game meat thing, which I really like. I find that very enchanting in sherry cask whiskies. So the finish, I think the finish or the double maturation in this case has really worked, because I think it's gone long enough that the sherry has become integrated and it's become this cohesive, big, chunky, chewy, delicious whole.
This is definitely fast forward to Christmas time for sure. It makes sense. I don't know if that's because you implanted the seed, but it definitely makes sense. And Julia and Angus, with all of us here, we'll tell you if we don't like something. There's got to be one person here that doesn't like it, and don't be afraid to say it, because it's exploration.
If anyone wants to slag off any of these bottlings, go for it. I can take it.
But this is really good. This is actually really good. But don't feel shy. A lot of the folks here, we've been on tastings. It's no problem if you say you don't like it. We don't. The last thing we would want to do is tell you, "Oh, it's great," as we all love it. This is an interesting series. I think there is a clear pattern going from spring to winter. I think there's been a lot of thought that went into it. I don't know if that was done at one time or multiple times throughout the year, but there's definitely that story kind of plays along well, as well as the artwork. It's hard to show on the screen, but you all have the links. The artwork really plays with that really well too. I mean, it kind of gets a little darker, it kind of gets a little bit more, maybe more of like a serious tone too, as you go from like spring down to winter.
Our artist for last year is a friend of mine called Melissa. She's not really a commercial artist. She's done some labels before, but she's her area of interest is really Celtic mythology and folklore and nature. And she's probably more of a hippie than I am. I mean, she does surfing, for example. So she came up with this concept of wanting to explore like forgotten creatures from Celtic mythology that she felt made sense within the idea of seasons. And I was really happy with what she did, because to me, it's such a departure from what you normally see on whiskey labels. And that's kind of what I want to do with Decadent Drinks, is like doing something very simple. We're just putting whiskey into bottles, glass bottles, standard glass bottles, and slapping a label on it. Within that very simple thing, what can we do to be a bit different, or where can we push boundaries, or where can we take decisions creatively that lead to something that wouldn't otherwise exist and is a bit more interesting for people? And I think you have to do that because it's a crowded marketplace, and I think it's important to try and push the boat out wherever we can.
I think that this is a really great series as far as enjoying whiskey without having to think about it too much. I've definitely noticed lately that this is a really good bottling strength. I pour it in a Glen Garioch, dash of water, and I sit down and have a nightcap at the end of the day. I don't have to think about it too much. The Mortlach was my least favorite of the four. I'm not really a big sherry person these days, other than the occasional Edredure, but I think my friend bought about 3 bottles of these, and we drank a half bottle of this a couple of weeks ago in a couple of evenings.
That's cool to hear. What is it about time where we could do like a little straw poll and see what people's favorites are in the series? I don't know if that's easy to do or not, but it'd be interesting to get some feedback and see what the general consensus is over which of the 4 people preferred.
Yeah, maybe the best way is in the chat. If everyone just chimes in with their favorite. I don't think I have a polling tool here. I don't think I do. But yeah, if you just quickly put in the chat what was your favorite, or if you're tied kind of first and second, that way you could see it. And Angus, I think you still have your screen up so you can at least see what's going in the chat, right?
Yeah, I can. I'm going to attempt to rejoin.
Well, we hear you loud and clear right now, by the way. I wouldn't change that. I think we hear you perfectly. Okay, so that's okay. Wait, Angus. I'm gonna turn your mic on. There you go. Okay, give it a shot.
How's that?
Sounds good.
Am I back in a meaningful way?
Yep.
Yeah, cool. So it's a question from Richard. Are you just buying from brokers and not rebarreling or anything? We buy from wherever we can find good casks. This is the most challenging time I think there's ever been to be an independent bottler in terms of supply and finding good whiskey. And we look around and find casks from private individuals, from auctions, from brokers, from third-party companies like Signatory. We really cast the net wide and do our research and use our relationships and just, you know, work very hard to make sure that we can try and secure and source a good quality product. It helps that me and my colleague Ian have got a good background in the whiskey industry. But yeah, it's hard. It's tough to find stuff, for sure.
We had, Angus and Julie, we had some folks that joined late, so they're probably catching up to join theirs. But we see a lot of Ben Nevis as the favorite. That seems like the and Mortlach, but Ben Nevis seems to be the overwhelming favorite.
I've had so much good feedback about that bottling. Everyone that tried it has been super impressed. Even like when we took that along with a load of our other sort of, you know, much more expensive whiskey sponge bottlings to Whiskey Live Paris, and we had so much good feedback about the Ben Nevis in both versions. So yeah, I'm not too surprised about that, but it's nice to see, and I'm happy to see that you know, there's still a lot of love for that whiskey out there. That's cool. And would you like to try one of the or the first of the mystery drams at the end?
So yeah, so we this is like speed dating. This is great timing for 4 drams. So we don't know what the 2 bonus drams are, so you all can disclose it. Why don't we pour bonus number 1, and then we can all talk about it, and then you two can disclose it however you wish, and then the second one. Does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So bonus number 1 is a whiskey which is quite historically unusual. It's not a whiskey you're likely to encounter any day, you know, every day of the week. And I'm gonna actually not say very much about it. I'm gonna let you guys taste it, and I'm curious to hear about your automatic impressions of it, because to me, it's a whiskey which is very much still under the radar. Or this bottling of it, I think this bottling is one of the best examples of it I've come across. I say that obviously to the person that actually bottled it, so it's probably cheating slightly, but I do think this is a really good bottling of this particular whiskey, and I think it's an unusual style. I think it's a historical style, and I think it's something that you're unlikely to encounter very often. Someone called James says "fruit in my face," which yeah, could have been a name for this bottling, I think, fairly accurately. Unless it's a request and he's just not had enough vitamin C or something like that.
No, it is. It's you nose it and you're like, whoa. It's like that's a very nice sign usually, right?
Well, and to me, it sort of sneaks up on you, but there's definitely some, you know, what I think of as sort of bourbon cask tropical fruit, which I haven't really gotten on. Like, I didn't get on the Glen Garioch this time, didn't really get on the Pulteney, but definitely some of that tropical fruit note, although it takes a little while to get there. This feels like it's at cask strength. This doesn't feel like it's at 48.
I'm pleased that there's all these people talking about how it's reminiscent of Irish whiskey. In this for what feels like, I don't know, months. Ever since we bottled it, I've been saying this is a bit like old style Irish whiskey. So it's very cool that if you try it blind, there seems to be multiple people getting that kind of that impression. It's not a grain. We've never bottled any grain whiskey yet. Not to say I wouldn't, we just haven't encountered any that we were really motivated to do. So the whiskey we're trying is Whiskey Sponge Bottling Edition number 67, I think. Is that right, Julia? I can't remember. It's an old Ros Do from Loch Lomond Distillery, and it was bottled last year. It's 29 years old, distilled in 1993, and we reduced this very slightly by about 2 degrees down to 57.1%. And I just love this whiskey. I think it's, all the things you guys are saying in the chat here, super tropical, reminiscent of Irish whiskies. I think this is all 100% correct. It's exactly the sort of impression I get from it. I love it. It's a beautiful whiskey, and I love the texture. I love the syrupness on the mouth. I love the fatness. I love the fact that the tropical fruit flavors come through almost like pulpy, overripe, really like fleshy fruits. And I love the oiliness as well. It reminds me of like old school pure pot Irish whiskey, where you get this lovely oily texture on the palate. It's not a whiskey that's made anymore. Loch Lomond make a whiskey called Ros Do, but it's lightly peated malt put through a column still, so it's technically a grain whiskey. Old Ros Do, the single malt that we're tasting now, was just classic double pot distilled single malt Scotch malt whiskey. There's various bottlings of it out there, but they're very inconsistent, and some are good, some are terrible. And this is obviously the best one. And the style at the time in the early 90s just closed Little Mill. And there was a lot of tinkering with makes like Inchmarin and Old Ros Do to make clones of Little Mill for blending. And then these casks, the parcels that got left to mature for a long period of time, really start to shine, I think. They need age to bring out that kind of intense tropicality and the oiliness. And this was a great cask because, you know, sitting at that volume in the cask, at that high ABV, that level of concentration, it's really showing beautifully at this age. So yes, talking about a lowlander, yeah, I agree as well. I agree with most of your comments here.
It has a Belgian ale quality to it. Like, I was trying to nail down the funkiness that I was getting on it, and it's not a bad funk, but there's just a little bit of funkiness to it. But it reminds me of a Belgian ale. There's a little bit of a yeasty component combined with all those tropical notes. That's just, it's like, oh man, it's really good.
Yeah, and I think it's worth just pointing out at this stage, you know, so we do have some of this one still available in the shop, and it's above 200 quid price per bottle, so you'll get free shipping on it to stay at the moment. We really, because of the sort of the challenges about importing in a traditional way into America being what they are, you know, we've tried to make the most of our ability to ship to America and do these kind of shipping deals that we've been doing recently. And, you know, we obviously are keen to develop our audience in America. You know, I know there's clubs out there, you know, with guys like you in it, you know, serious, educated and enthusiastic lovers of good whiskey. You know, so do spread the word. And if you want to do another Decadent Drinks tasting at some point, you know, speak to us, because we'd be very happy to work with you and do something like that. You know, we're happy to put in the legwork and grow our, you know, awareness of our company and our products in America sort of organically over time, and support it with like the discount code we've done for you guys tonight, and the shipping deals and things like that. So yeah, check out the shop and have a look. And, you know, if you want one of these Ros Do's, then do strike, because I think the product's going to come down off the website on Friday. As will the shipping discount. I think that's going to end then as well. So
Sunday. Sorry, Angus. It'll end Sunday evening.
All right, Sunday. There we go.
And all of our archived bottlings will come off Sunday evening as well.
Yeah, and that includes this Ros Do. So yeah.
I'm going to ask a dumb question you probably get asked a lot. You mentioned the Ros Do being over 200 quid. What is driving the pricing of the bottles going up? Is it simply just cask scarcity and hard to find, and they're asking more for their casks?
There's more and more of the big companies holding on to stock. There's more and more smaller people and hobbyists looking to get casks. The investment nonsense that's happened in the last 10 years has really, you know, like corroded the traditional market for independent companies that want to just bottle whiskey. So it's a mess. There's a lot of people playing. There's huge competition, and there's lots of the big guys trying to lock down and really control supply. So the people that are sort of stuck in the middle, that are hurt the most, are the people that are just trying to do traditional indie bottling, because the price that we have to pay for casks and the price that is coming down the line is just so painful, and it pushes the price up, and it's our margins that get squeezed. The price has not even been fully handed on to the consumer yet. There's prices coming for stocks of whiskey, which I know for a fact, I just don't think anyone's prepared to pay. I mean, there's stocks where we, under our present model, could buy, and we would have to sell something like a Macduff 10-year-old from a refill hogshead for over £100 a bottle. And I'm just not prepared to do that. And I know that you guys are not prepared to pay that. So where does that leave the industry, and where does that leave the situation? It's very messy and very uncertain. And I mean, I sort of accept a certain level of high pricing as long as I'm confident in the quality of the liquid, and that what's in the bottle is beautiful, and that I can stand by it and say, well, yeah, I know it's on the pricey side, but I think it's a beautiful whiskey, and I think it's a special whiskey. And that's a perfect example of something like this Rosdu, where I think it's an underrated, lesser known style. It's historical. It's a lot of interesting stuff to say about it, and it's a beautiful whiskey with a flavor profile that I think is quite rare. It's hard to find a whiskey that tastes like this in this day and age. So when something like that happens, when those points align, then I feel like that it's the right sort of thing for us to bottle.
Angus, I've got a question about Loch Lomond. What do you think accounts for what seems to be like an abrupt change in quality? About 10, 15 years ago, you probably know, their whiskeys seemed a bit hairy in quality, to be nice about it. And now suddenly the stuff coming from them is excellent. How does that happen with a brand?
He's just frozen. He's not.
He's blown away by your question, Michael.
Yeah, your question,
nice job.
You just blew his mind.
How does Lomond raise their quality?
I'm just going back. Some of you got this one. This one is fantastic. It's a 29-year Lomond in Mizunara. I think most of you got a sample. This is really good. So it follows your logic. It's like they either did something like that many years ago, or they were like the practice of re-racking and stuff also went into effect. It turned out to be like really, really nice.
Sorry, I'm back.
Did you hear a
so
question?
I heard the question about what. So essentially, you were asking what happened about 10 years ago. Why did the quality improve?
Yeah.
Yeah. So with Loch Lomond, I think they always made good whiskies, but I think what they suffered from for years and years was massive indifference in the ownership, in that they would just, for their official bottlings, essentially chuck a fistful of grain into the warehouse and bottle whatever those things hit. That was their cask selection process. And I think what really changed is that they had some change in ownership. They took a different approach. They started to think much more about single malt branding and growing that, and they started to pay attention to what was required for that. And I think that they realized they had some good liquid and started to really hone in on what they recognized were the better aspects of their liquid. And they improved their wood, they improved their production, they embraced their experimental capacity. If you've ever been to their still room, it's like a Borg ship. It's insane. It's completely stills coming out the wall and all sorts of crazy stuff. They can do anything there. It's amazing. The fact they have a cooperage on site, they have a laboratory on site. It's still one of the few distilleries you can visit and see like crazy mad scientist ladies in lab coats that will tell you stuff about whiskey that you didn't even know you didn't know. So it's a really cool distillery. I urge you to go if you can. And there's some stuff they're making which is still totally like Inchmurrin as a make. It can be exquisite, and there's still no one really knows or thinks much about it in my experience.
I think distilleries like Loch Lomond and Rose Isle, or however you pronounce it, the Diageo and Super Plant, those sort of distilleries just scare me as a buyer, because I feel like 10, 15 years from now, everything's going to be so much up on flavor, and you're not going to know what you're drinking anymore. And
yeah, I used to be concerned about that as well to an extent, but actually Rose Isle has been a bit of a letdown for Diageo from what I've heard. Like the sort of information I've got from speaking to people there is that it hasn't quite worked in the way they wanted it to. They're not able to play as many tunes on it as they can. Loch Lomond works because they didn't set out to make things other than just fun recipes that were all Loch Lomond. They've named them all after islands on Loch Lomond, and they're not trying to clone other whiskies. They're trying to make cool original whiskies. And I think that's the distinction, which is really important. I used to worry about the future as well in that same sort of way, but actually, when I think about the future now, I think it's really owned by the mad number of small, new, interesting distilleries which are starting up, which in terms of volume is not even equal to one Rose Isle, but in terms of diversity of flavor and interesting stories and character and people, it's a very rich tapestry that's emerging, and I think probably we're entering a very exciting period in whiskey. And it's global, it's not just Scottish, but it is also crucially happening in Scotland. So for those of us that sort of, like me, are very romantically and emotionally attached to specifically Scotch whiskey, it's a good time ahead, I think.
Of the new ones that you'd mentioned, alluded to, a lot of the small ones are going to be the stars someday. Of the new ones, do you have a like a top three or a couple favorites that really stand out to you that wow, they're headed the right direction? Yeah, so at the moment, obviously I love Dornoch because they're pals of mine, and they're doing funky stuff that's really cool. And in Scotland, I also like Ardnamurchan and Knockneen. I think the guys at Dunfail are going to do good stuff. Who else do I really like? And outside Scotland, I think that Park Aldenby at Smogan is doing great work. There's many others, and like you guys in America are leading the charge on this. Like, you're so spoiled for choice in terms of sheer volume of craft distilleries, and there's every time I speak to guys that have visited America, say try this, and they shove a sample up my nose, and I just think, this is fantastic. What is it? And it's like, I can't remember. I was drunk, but it's amazing. And it's okay, fine. Probably Copperworks. I'm gonna always scream about Copperworks. Everyone should be drinking Copperworks. They're incredible.
Yeah, I meant to speak to some of you guys about finding a cask of something I want to do Whiskey Sponge, Whiskey. I want to find an American whiskey and an Irish whiskey to do for that. So
can you explain? Can you explain Rose Isle? I mean, I think very few people know what it is.
So Rose Isle is Diageo's like mega distillery that they built. That could do 15 million liters, and it was designed to be able to clone other makes. So they could make Waxy one week, they can make peaty the next week, they can make Lowland the week after. It's a blender's distillery, really. It wasn't meant for single malt. It was meant to make different profiles of single malt specifically to feed blends in a strategic fashion. But I think Diageo have found out that it's not necessarily working out in the way they wanted. I think they found out that it's, and this is pretty common knowledge now, that it's much harder to make Waxy than I think they perhaps realized. Like, they've done all these experiments at Chinunich and Dalyuen in particular to try and clone that very famous Clynelish waxiness, and it's proven harder than they realized. And they've sort of realized to the point that it's so much to do with the gunge that builds up in the low wines and faints receiver. I had a great story from a guy at Diageo who said that they essentially took the gunge out of the low wines and faints receiver to take it to another distillery to inoculate another distillery's receiver to try and help generate waxiness at a different distillery. And they put it into a big plastic transport vessel called an IBC, and the gunge just it was left there too long and it ate through the IBC. So, you know, the gunge in whiskey has power. Distilleries should be dirty. They should not be clean.
That's the
Cleanliness.
wax I want in my mouth.
I agree. I think if you had that wax in your mouth, you would have no mouth. But yes, second generation wax from the gunge. That's what I want as well.
I want to see that escaped gunge on a sponge label.
Sponge gunge, gunge sponge. I mean, gunge sponge is a great brand, and we will be doing that at some point.
The Nika aromatic yeasts are really like that too. A lot of experimentation that are really nice. But as we transition to the last bonus pour, I thought something else that might be helpful to you all is what you were saying, Angus, is use us to your advantage. We're all buyers. We all buy a lot of whiskey. We're the ones that bars usually hate when we show up. We're asking like, what's this? And they have no idea. Like, we're the assholes that show up to the bar that we've, been way too far along on our whiskey journey. But also,
I'm also that asshole.
That's right. I don't mean that, but like, it's true, right? You go to a bar, you walk in, you're very excited, like, oh, it has whiskey in the name, and you show up, you're like, fuck, this place sucks. But use us to your advantage. We have the relationships and all that. Anything we can do to help. One of the other things I'll mention is that we are very inclusive too. This is a very inclusive group. When I put this together, it was, hey, first come, first serve. There were a handful of women that joined too. I think at least one or two of them joined and dropped out. We want to be very inclusive. We don't want to have these tastings be just a bunch of dudes every time. We're very inclusive of all different people. And so we all carry that. I know everybody here, we all carry that mentality in everything that we do as well. So, and it's so important because bringing those different perspectives and ideas and tastes and all of those opinions to the table as well. So don't think of us as like a big dude group. We are very inclusive in everything that we do as well. I'm not even going to read the comments of who was as I'm rambling. I'm not even going to read that. But so with that, shall we move on to the last bonus stream?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to pick up on one comment in the chat where someone says everyone goes for Westland. What are you guys' views on Westland? Is it considered good or overrated, or what's the
new stuff is, as they've hit 7 years old, I really think they've found the sweet spot. Some of the single barrels they've been putting out recently, I think, are just incredibly complex and really world class, which I didn't used to think that of Westland a few years ago.
Yeah, they used to be. Their picks used to be fairly hot, and they can be still very hot. When I say hot, I'm always looking for something that's balanced. I never want to know the ABV when tasting it or picking something for our group when we do single cast picks. But their stuff tended to be a little hot. It is coming of age now where it's really, really well balanced. So they have a great a blend of 5 malts, so they care about their product. Yeah, it's really, really well done.
Cool. Okay. Thank you for the feedback. That's useful.
They also really benefited from really good funding. They had a really nice. It was sort of a pet project of a very wealthy family, so they had a lot of good funding at the start. Some good angels at the start, sort of funding their ways that a lot of American craft distillers don't have. So they sort of had the luxury of being able to really invest in their malts. And you do see it. You do see it. They also figured out, I believe they got their early peated stuff from, I see McCarthy's. They got their early peated stuff from Scotland, their barley. And so their early peated stuff was very reminiscent of like Kilchoman and really young Scottish stuff. But I think they're doing something different now. But they did benefit from really good investors at the start.
They're trying to do their own peat. They're trying to do their own terroir.
That's coming out this month. That's coming out literally in 2 days.
Exactly.
I'm here in Seattle. I have a friend that's the cocktail manager there. Tried to hook her and Angus up with someone at Westland. Angus, if you want samples of Westland, I have about 10 downstairs, including some of their Outpost range stuff, and I'm more than happy to ship it to you in Scotland. I think I could come up with some.
We'll talk offline. I said I am looking for a whiskey sponge at some point. So yeah, we can chat. My market research continues. I need to essentially just come to America for about 3 months and just tour the country, going to distilleries. But that can probably I don't know. I think that won't be able to happen until like 2050, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, let's talk about the final dram number 6. So this is it's another sponge. There's been 1 or 2 correct guesses in the chat so far. I'll just tell you what this one is. This is Whiskey Sponge Edition number 69. It's Ardmore 2000. And so those of you...
We lost you. Here's the link for what it is. I like the pose, though. He's got the pose, but you might be able to hear us, Angus, but we definitely lost you right at the start. Who knew what this was, by the way? I'm sure a bunch of you knew. Yeah. I'm sure a bunch of you
Harold. Harold nailed it. He was in chat. He nailed it.
It was either
has a very old school
I haven't
style.
tried either of them.
Yeah. Lovely.
Angus has the Ardmore spirit fingers going on right now.
James, I want to thank you for sharing these drams with all of us. And I know you know the pours are free, but at the end of this tasting, it's going to cost me a lot of money on Decadent Drams website. So thank you for that.
I don't know if I'll pour this many ever again. That sucked. It's a lot. I got a system. As you all we all have systems. Like I got a system that works, but it was a lot. But
hello.
I'm glad you all can join too. Thank you for joining. This is what it's all about. Like I wasn't gonna open this and just drink it myself. Julia, I was gonna open these and like drink it for like the next year or so. We have bottles past like all of us have bottles that are just like flying off because we'll open it, we'll share it, sample it, whatever, and then it's gone. And then it's like on to the next. And so it's like nonstop conveyor belt. So this was just a nice way to get everybody together. And especially for your brand, it's just so special. We all know it, but I don't know that we've all had the chance to sit with you and Angus and talk through kind of the thought process and how you choose casks, how you choose bottlings, the artwork and the creativity. Because so much out there is just like, bottle it, put it out. And it's like, okay, now there's like 10 Kawila 10-year casks that we're not going to buy all of them. But to add some character and some personality and some like fun to is really special. I think that's how we all got connected. Why everybody's here as well.
Absolutely.
Guys, I can tell you have to look out for the special commemorative label that I'm going to create to celebrate the fact that I had the shittest internet connection in the history of my career tonight. So, yeah. What do people think of the Ardmore? I'm sorry I cut out again. Just I don't know what to say. I apologize.
It's good. I mean, it's incredible. I love Ardmore. I've recently discovered it in like the past year, and I'm obsessed with their Highland peat profile. I typically like them in ex-bourbon more, but this is really, really chewable.
Yeah, so this one is a double matured in sherry again, but it was about 2.5 years in first fill Oloroso sherry butts. And we bottled it at cask strength. And as I was saying before, it's naturally medium Ardmore peat. So it's a lot of contemporary Ardmore casks are from ex-Lafroig barrels, so they're much peatier. This stuff is proper Ardmore peat. It was direct coal-fired distillation when this was made in the year 2000, 22 years old. And that layer of sherry that's been added by that last 2.5 years double maturation, I think is integrated beautifully with the peat. So you get that lovely soft peat, rich sherry. It just creates a really dense, I think much more sort of old school Highland malt whiskey character, which I really like. So hopefully you guys like it as well. It's a nice counterpart to the Rosdu, two kind of slightly more historic old school profiles, which you don't necessarily find too often anymore. And I think they give a good illustration of the sort of whiskies that we like to try and find and bottle.
It's fantastic. It's a great way to close this out. This is really the last two actually were really, really special. Thank you for donating. These are really nice to enjoy these.
Well, you're very welcome, and thank you very much for organising this tasting of our Equinox and Solstice series. It's been a for me to try them or to see you guys try them all together as a set. I think it's the first time we've done that, and I think it's an indication that we should do it more often. So thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure. I'm very sorry for the shitness of my internet, but it's been a pleasure to join you all.
Yeah, so maybe we can leave you with if you're willing to give us a last thought, we can kind of close it up. But I wanted you all to take notice of one thing. This is a very special one, and special thanks to Julia and Angus for everything. Like, this is really a treat for us. Thank you all for joining. I know a lot of you are still at work and you're in your car and all over, so thank you for joining. I think the best way to leave this is where we kind of started, which is what is Decadent Drinks? What is Whiskey Sponge? What is Equinox and Solstice? Why is it different? Why is it special? Why should we buy it? Why should we be interested? And it goes back to, again, this idea of giving personality, making it fun. If it was an everyday drinker, why wouldn't you just put like a basic label? Why do artwork from somebody? It's because it's just so much more meaningful, right? So much more enjoyable. So we'll leave you with the last bottle we had was Ardmore. You should look it up. I sent the link. Read the back of it. And this is the whole point. I think this summarizes this whole tasting. It's how to make Ardmore. Use giant land crabs to harvest your whiskey crops. Take care to do lots of wheelies in your death tractor in order to mush the barley in a big muddy paste in your field. If in doubt, add extra dung. And there's like 5 more steps that are really, really interesting, but they add personality. It's different. It's fun. And so I think that's what drew us to this tasting and spending the evening with you all. And thanks again for taking your time. We'd like to leave the last thought to you all. Like, what do we walk away with from this? What is the one thing, as we tried Equinox and Solstice and these two, what do we walk away with, in your opinion, that we should remember as we think about Decadent Drinks, Whiskey Sponge, Equinox and Solstice, and all the others from here on out?
I think you should go away with the sense that that whiskey and life are about fun, and that, you know, life is hard, and it's not good to take it too seriously all the time, and that little moments and islands of fun and decadence and silliness and pleasure are kind of what make it worth living. And that is exactly what we try.
Oh, we lost him right in the middle.
Dude, so many people just got cut. I was like, what just happened?
I don't know if shit.
It's almost like it shut automatically.
Shit, maybe
your account, you need to put some more money in your account.
Please insert a quarter.
I don't know why some people get kicked out and not others, but I think it might have been the settings for the tasting. But oh, here they come. 1 second.
They're all running off to buy bottles right now.
Sorry, guys. That was my internet now. Sorry, Angus, finish your thought.
Yeah, so I'd like you all to take away the fact that the internet in the UK is so terrible, and please send 8 parcels of routers and Ethernet.
Angus, I'm gonna send you 100 America Online CDs for dial-up internet.
That'd be great. Also, what I'd like you to do is just book us for another tasting, and we'll do this properly sometime. And I'll make sure that I am, or I'll just fly out there and do it in a world where they have proper internet. I don't know, something like that. But listen, yeah, just the key thing to take away is really that you know, whiskey should be about fun, and I think what we try to be is amazing quality liquid, but presented in a way which is about not taking life too seriously, having fun, and focusing on pleasure and sharing that with friends.
Well, cheers. So with that, Slanja, everyone, thank you so much. Thank you, Angus and Julia. Looking forward to the next time. Use us as a test bed. Ask us any questions. Whatever. And Julia, we can debrief. I can share whatever contact information you want to do so people can stay in touch. But again, I'll stop the recording, and thank you so much for joining. Hopefully everyone had a really great time on a Thursday midday. So thank you again, and look forward to the next time. Cheers.
Thank you, James.